Okay, so my name's Nikki Spalding and I'd like to welcome you here this afternoon, and yeah, thanks for finding the time to come and I suppose have the discussion about family daycare and where we're up to at the moment, and definitely the challenges and the changes that can continue to present themselves, I suppose, in family daycare. My background, I'm from Albury, and my background is in children's services for 35 something years. I don't know, I think I stopped counting at 35, but it's been a bit more than that, and in more recent years with family daycare. And as I said to the group this morning, I think I like working with family daycare services for a variety of reasons, and one being I think because there's some really intelligent, innovative people and definitely resilience within family daycare. But I think I also, because I like change, I like the complexities of family daycare as well, because no 2 days are ever probably the same. But I am here on behalf of Family Daycare Services Education and Support Project. We won't have the magic answers for services that are losing funding and facing again the challenges to come. But what we can do is facilitate a discussion. And I'll just go over some of the basics, I suppose. The Family Daycare Services Education and Support Project is funded by the Department of Education, so federally funded. It's being managed by New South Wales Family Daycare in partnership with Family Daycare Queensland. The project includes, and has done to date, research, surveys, sector consultation, peak body collaboration, publications, information sessions such as these, a website, resources, service support, webinars, newsletters and tools. Yeah, so these will be the last of the information sessions that are going around like this. Next year, the support of the sector as such will be more one-on-one to services in need. The eligibility criteria as such I'm not sure of, and all I can probably suggest is that you keep an eye on our Community Support Project website and definitely make sure you're on the emailing list there so that you can be sent the information and alerted when things are coming up in the future. Now our project will cease on the 30th of June next year, so it was only that 12 months that we were working with. The session content, we've broken it down into 5 areas, and as I said, we'll kind of determine as we go through how much time we spend on different areas. The first thing is the first topic as such, or areas, is a question of quality. Okay, all these changes are taking place, but we're not talking about one of the concerns we have, and that is quality of being compromised as such when we're talking about such large funding cuts. Methods of service review, what we'll do is look at some very, very simple things to do. Some services go through review processes more frequently than others. Some have never been through a review process. So it's just having a look at some really simple things to do particularly to get the team on board. So the stakeholders such as your educators and your families and sponsors, if that's the situation. With options to consider part 3, what we'll look at there is, I suppose in again light of losing funding, how costs can be reduced, how income can be increased. So we'll look at that in light of fees and levies as such, and also maybe other means of increasing income. And also we'll have a little look at mergers and amalgamations, and again, if that is relevant to you or what you want to discuss a bit more, we can spend some time on that. Financial matters, part 4, we will spend a bit of time on, not a huge amount of time, only being that sometimes it's hard to talk and go through budgets in a group situation. That's very hands-on type thing, but I'll be showing you what's in our publication and how, again, it might support you if you're reviewing your service and where you're going with that. So yeah, very much that financial matters is based on a break-even budget. Other related topics, there's a few things there that I suppose those little things that didn't fit in elsewhere as such, so we've kind of tagged them on the end, looking at again sponsor support, leadership, a little bit about change, and also that question of unmet demand. If services are going to apply for funding and believe they're eligible, they would have to also be able to show or display that there's unmet demand for care in their area. So a little look at that. Okay, now this is the publication that you'll be able to take with you today. I don't use them as such in the session, so it's not like you need them in front of you, but I just will point out a few things that I think are fantastic about this publication. One being the benchmarking that was done. 8 services from different parts of Australia were prepared to share the information on their service. So it was an opportunity for us to gather that information. The other thing too, and I'll highlight, is 10 case studies of different services. Now these are different service types, so you'll find sponsored, community-based, for-profit, not-for-profit, a variety there, and again who've kind of shared a bit of their story of where they're up to now and what they're looking to for the future. Okay, just some basics about the community support program that I'm hoping everybody would be aware of, but we'll make sure that again the basics are gone over. From April 2014, new family daycare services commenced assessment under the revised eligibility criteria, and that's the same criteria that all services who feel they'll be eligible will be assessed under from July next year. Services who believe they are eligible to receive the funding will be putting in applications from April. To my understanding, the department won't accept them prior to that. Eligible services will be offered a 12-month contract, but I suppose another level of uncertainty there for any services who believe they will be eligible is that those contracts may need to be reviewed during that 12 months if things change within the sector. So in other words, if a service is the sole provider and then a new service starts up and they're no longer the sole provider of family daycare in that area, then there's a possibility they'll lose that funding, and maybe within 6 months. There will be an annual cap of $250,000 on CSP operational support grants for any service that is eligible. And to my understanding too, the formula as such for deciding how much that will be for any given service is going to be the same as well. I haven't heard that there's going to be changes to that. The eligibility criteria: a service must be either a regional remote, an SA2, or within a city location, an SA3, that is highly socio-economically disadvantaged. So that's the first level of criteria. The service must be the sole provider in the area. Okay, so that's across the board for any SA2 or SA3. The service must show evidence that there's unmet demand for children's services in that area, and again that's for SA2s or SA3s. Services can conduct the self-assessment and the tools and checklists and that are available on the department website, and just keeping in mind that they are being updated, so things do change and will change and have changed. I think the first lot of lists went out in June and then they were updated, might have been late August, early September, something like that. So, you know, I think we're looking at the end of the year or early next year for the next lot of changes. And keeping in mind too, the goalpost of the eligibility criteria is not changing. It's just what's changing within the sector. And again, whether it's new services opening or services closing or just I suppose the allocation as such, if we're looking at 51% or the majority of educators in an area, if there's a shift there, that can also shift the information on the lists as well. So that's where they can be accessed through the education department, and again it's worthwhile keeping an eye on those lists too. I was able to access on the website the application that new services use at the moment if they believe they're going to be eligible or they're applying for funding. It's a fairly standard form as such, application form, and I was just interested in this unmet demand, you know, where they're going to have just a bit of a square for you to fill in, but what it actually says, it asks services to attach the relevant documents. So in other words, I think they're again leaving that open to your interpretation of what you're going to gather and how you're going to present it. Bit of a disclaimer, all information provided in the session is generic. Service providers must ensure they abide by laws, regulations, policies, employment agreement, organisational contracts, etc. when making any changes to the service structure or provision. So, as the family daycare sector plan for and adjust to changes to their financial situation, it's important that we have a discussion about quality. Quality in a service or product is not what you put into it, it's what the client or customer gets out of it. We need to be aware of not always just we think quality is. You know, service providers, we think it is this, this and this. This is what we need to do. It's a worthwhile exercise if we also turn it around and say, okay, what is the customer's experience? What is the client's experience? Who are the customer and client? So basically we're talking the educators and the families. So, you know, how are we gathering information from them to ask them what their experience is and what do they call quality? What do they want out of a quality service? Because we might be doing a list of essential things here that don't necessarily match up with theirs. Not that we, again, want to compromise on quality, but we need to know what we all think quality is, because it will vary. Okay. In order to introduce new ways of perceiving and operating services, old ways of perceiving and operating family daycare needed to be reviewed, challenged and at times changed. I actually really like this quote because I think this is exactly where the sector's up to at the moment. I think in light of possible cutbacks to individual services and challenges to the sector as a whole, I think it's time for review. And even when I'm working with services who believe they will be eligible for the funding next year, I'm still saying you need to be reviewing your service. This is the time for it because things are changing. And we're in a much more competitive market now than we've ever been before. Extremely. So it's like you can't go past to that. And again, any services that believe they may be eligible may have funding now but might not have it again in 6 months, 12 months or whatever time. So, you know, that's the reality that we now work within. Okay, some really basics about reviewing. Like I said, when some service providers will have been part of reviews, particularly some who've been sponsored by large organisations. Often, councils particularly go through review processes quite frequently or thoroughly. So you may be part of that. But again, not all services have had that opportunity to sit back and have a look at where they're up to in service provision and what they want to be in the future. So the 4 simple steps suggesting reviewing the service, selecting some way. And again, reviewing the service, when you say it like that, that's huge. Where do we start? Where do we stop? How do we do it, kind of thing? And there's a variety of methods to use. But really, if you have a look at the service, you'll be able to isolate, provision as such or areas that you want to review. Making decisions, then implementing changes should lead to an evaluation and perhaps recalibration. So in other words, it's not really cyclic because you're not going to go around and keep changing everything. We just don't have the time and the energy for that. But through evaluation, we might decide that there's things that we still need to work on or we want to change or just toss all together. So simple review processes. But why review? Reviewing does assist services to make decisions, and working on that second point, it provides validation for decisions because we are accountable. So in other words, if we're increasing levies to educators, if we're increasing fees to family, if we're taking parts away of our service provision, why are we doing it? How was that decision made? Where was the consultation? How did it all come about? We are accountable and we need to be able to answer questions. It does encourage stakeholders to be involved as well, being that, again, parts of the review particularly, you'll see yourself. That's really where educators or families can, their opinion and again, that consultation will be invaluable. So, for example, if you were looking at reviewing play session, you're off a play session, but you wanted to kind of have a look at that. Can it continue the way it has? Can you afford it? Does it need to change or whatever? They're the type of things that you definitely need to be hearing about from the educators. It is a proactive approach. Again, some services with large providers, the reviews might be asked of them, but even if that's not the case, it's a way that, again, we can stand back, look at the service, pull it apart as such and inform decision. It promotes short and long-term goal setting. Being that I think when you undergo any of these review strategies or ways of review as such, generally lists start. You kind of start the list of things that you can do now and the things you can do later or you might address later. So there's your short and your long term. And I must admit, when I look at any goal setting in short and long term, I straight away think of the QIP. You know, if we're going to go through these review processes, there's a lot of your QIP happening. Okay, so it's not like don't reinvent the wheel. If this is how it's going to be and this is what your service needs at the moment, well, that's how it should be. Remembering that the QIP can look like what you want it to look like. I mean, they gave us a template to work with, but it was only a suggestion. Part 3, options to consider. Customers do not care how much it costs the business, they care about how much it costs them. Would that be true? Again, a bit of human nature happening there. And I will just put forward again, I don't think that they necessarily don't care about the business. Families very much care about the business of family daycare for their children. You know, what is the care provided for their children? Having said that, I think that, and we've already mentioned it, I think there's a disconnection there with the coordination team and the business that we do. Maybe there isn't that same understanding and care factor as such. And that's okay. Again, our relationship with the families is going to be different than the educators' relationships with the families. But in light of that, again, what information are we sharing with families about our coordination unit and the business that we do, and what marketing do we do of that, and also what do educators know about our business as such? What are they telling families as well? If that's the majority of the relationship and the conversation, well, what conversation is it? But again, that's the bottom line. They care about how much it costs them. Looking at the 4 options again, there's an opportunity there, I suppose, for reducing costs, or we'll delve into, is there an opportunity for reducing costs and where could that come from? Increasing income through fees and charges. So again, having a look at what are the fees and charges you might have in place, or what things are you considering. Increase in income in other means. Okay, is there opportunity? Some services are coming up with innovative ideas, but again, you've always have to weigh up what is the cost of those ideas, you know, because if we're putting anything in place, there's going to be staff hours involved in that. Mergers and amalgamations as well. Okay, a little bit of information on that, and again, if it's relevant. Reviewing service efficiencies, particularly in relation to staff hours and tasks, where can dollars be saved? And again, you know, going back to what are staff doing in those hours of the day, the week, the fortnight, whatever it might be, and is there possibilities for change there? Are you carrying out activities or offering services that could be considered non-essential in tough times? And again, going back to the original list that we had of, you know, what is essential and what is perhaps additional. Increasing income via fees and charges. Although options may be limited, increasing fees and levies is not taken lightly as it impacts educators and families directly. Well, yes, in other words, and I don't consider you are taking, you know, these decisions lightly, and I think it's one of the reasons there is concern across the sector, because people know the communities that they're working within and you know, don't necessarily want to just keep increasing fees as such to families or educators. Having said that, I suppose it's that we remember and educators understand that 50% of increases may be, if they're to the families, may be offset by the childcare rebate. And of course, if we do increase levies to educators, that they could be offset by tax reductions as well, so, or tax claims. Service providers should consider the best way to implement increases while reassuring educators and families of the value and quality that that is offered. And I think that goes back to, again, the marketing. You know, it's at a time where we might be increasing fees and that, but also cutting back on some of the services we provide. How do we market that in the best possible way we can? You know, what conversations are we having with our stakeholders to let them know that the quality, though, our service is still viable and that the quality is there within it. Okay, in light of that, I'll just share a little bit more information about what we have gathered, I suppose. Now these are family levies. Parent levies are sometimes being charged per hour per child, or per day, or per week. So there's a variety of ways, again, that they're being implemented. And our information showed that they tend to range between 50 cents an hour to 90 cents an hour. Okay, so that's current information. Enrolment fees may or may not be imposed as a one-off fee or an annual fee. Again, the information we had showed that there'll be a $0 to $80 per child or per family. Okay, so sometimes it's a one-off fee that families are paying. Some services are charging an annual fee for families to be registered with the service. I think a lot of these things too depend on your market as such, and you know your market. You know, is that where you might lose families, or is that okay? Do you have enough families on waiting lists and all the rest of it to make that okay? Again, it will depend on the different services and often where they're located. Transport of children, for example, preschool pick-up and drop-off. So in other words, the educators might charge the families as such, you know, if they're providing those services. Play session attendance, again, if educators are taking children to play sessions, sometimes they'll put they'll include that in the levy, or have a payment as such to the parents. Or excursion levy is the same, can be per excursion or a one-off that the educators might impose. And a waiting list fee might be put in place by the service. Educator levies can be charged per week, per percentage of income, annually, per day of operation, per timesheet, per child in care. So they're the different examples we've got of how educator levies are being implemented, I suppose. So percentage of income, from what I've heard, that can bring quite good returns, depending again on what the percentage is. Again, and services, it's a good discussion for the team, because these decisions are come about for different reasons. Some services will say that, you know, per day of operation works for them. Okay, for the educators works 3 days and all the rest of it, so that's what that's based on. Others will say, but the support is the same of educators working 3 days and those 5, so therefore no, it should just be the same fee. Doesn't matter what the days of operation are. So that type of thing. So there again, the discussions that you kind of need to have, and how your service feels about it and where you sit with it. But just recognising that different things are happening within the sector and can work quite well. Mergers and amalgamation. A merger is the fusion of 2 or more services, and it is a process in which the identity of one or more entities is lost. An amalgamation is blending together 2 or more services in a fashion that both lose their identities and a new separate entity is born. Financial matters. Again, there's quite a bit of information within the publication about a break-even budget. The break-even budget is a point where a business makes no profit or loss. It can be used to determine what volume of sales or service you need to get over before making a profit. And again, you'd understand, those of you working with a break-even budget as such, and it's a good place to start as such, because you can. Even a break-even for a not-for-profit organisation, you're still building in some sort of a surplus, aren't you? Because, you know, you have to have that contingency there, because things will change over a year and we always need something to fall back on. So if you were a for-profit organisation, you're just building that larger amount in what you deem that you need as a profit. it can be used to determine the impact of cost and pricing changes on a service. And again, that level of accountability, you know, if we're going to be introducing or increasing fees or levies, whether it be to educators or families, well, why? How is that decision being made? And I was talking to one service provider earlier on with these sessions who doesn't have a budget and never has had a budget. The service doesn't have educator levies, and they were thinking of introducing a levy, but they basically plucked the figure out of the air because they didn't have any of the workings to make the decision on. So really, how do they know that what figure they're putting forward is going to cover the loss of funding or as much as they need to cover? So again, you know, that transparency of services and that accountability is it's crucial that we, you know, put time and effort into this. So as I said, there's much more information there in that book. And what it does also, it does clarify the difference between variable and fixed costs. Fixed again being your lesser costs, but the ones that are just have to be in place to provide the service as such. You can't get away from them, but like I said, they tend to be lesser than the variable costs, particularly if you put staff wages in the variable costs, because then you do have more room for movement, I suppose, or decision making or reducing if need be. It then goes through, and this is exactly the same as what's in the book. This is very hard to do with a group in this situation, so I'm not going to spend much time on it, but just being aware that it's there. It's an example of a break-even budget looking at a service that has 57 educators, okay? Looking at the variable costs, the fixed costs, what comes in and what goes out in the way of those collectively and individually, so breaking it down so it's per educator as such, and then also the opportunity for what can come in the way of revenue. So don't mind me while I just skip through to the end. As you can see, they're different equations each time. Okay, but this is actually where it ends up. So you're breaking it down to required revenue per educator. So it's very simple, if you know what I mean, and for some it might be, it's a starting point for a review financially of the service. Again, going, what educators do we have? How much revenue do we have coming in if we break it down per educator or per day of service provision, knowing that, again, not all educators are full-time. Okay, so some are going to do 3, so it might be if the figure's nearly $11,000, well, you know, you're doing the dividing over 5 days to work out what 3 days is. So again, just taking the time, if that might be something you already do, or it might be not a way that you review finances, but it is an opportunity. And in the back of the booklet is the template for those. Like I said, the examples go through the pages. Where are they? Somewhere here. Well, they are there. And then, as I said, it's exactly the same as it appears up there, but it is the template for you to work on that yourself. Must be just before it. Yep, there. Okay. And again, I think that's one of those things that you need the hands-on, don't you? You need the hands-on doing it rather than just looking at this. 57 just being an opportunity for looking at a service that type, that size, but I don't know that it was chosen for any other reason, if you know what I mean. I don't know that it's the magic number. Other related topics, just very quickly, sponsors support. Some services do have the support of sponsors, which is fantastic. Some, again, might even have sponsors that at the moment are hesitant or reluctant. So I think it's a matter of having those conversations with them, and I suppose with my rose-coloured glasses on, just saying, you know, reminding them of the reason that they supported family daycare in the beginning. You know, the value of family daycare as a model and what you do for the communities that you work in. You know, the importance of family daycare. And going to them, I suppose, at the moment with some ideas and some plans yourself. Some service providers might affect change themselves, might bring about change, and they have control and they're the decision makers. But again, what conversations are we having? And I know some service providers too are also saying, that they're trying very hard to have conversations about, yes, financial situations, but quality, and having that conversation that goes up this way through tiers of management can be quite difficult at times. So yeah, it's a matter of putting something together and I suppose preparing yourself for that conversation. The impact of change. This type of thing I think can be quite handy when you are again talking with your stakeholders, particularly your educators, if you're bringing about more change. This, and again, this PowerPoint will be available to you, I would think, in December when these sessions finish travelling around the countryside. But yeah, just talking to the educators and asking, can they see themselves? Where do they see themselves at this point of time with more change to come? Are they the critic, the people who oppose change, don't necessarily offer ideas but will oppose change? The victim who might be panicking, oh, you know, the service is going to close, or I'll have to finish with the family daycare, or I better quickly run and go elsewhere, that type of thing. The bystander, the people, again, to some degree might have their heads in the sand, but also I think often we have educators who go, well, actually, again, that's your business and you'll tell us what we need to know and what we have to do. You know, that level of trust there. But recognising that that's what they're doing, and do they have to be bystanders, or can they actually be navigators? Can they be part of your team who's working towards changing circumstances and having a voice in all of that? And again, where their ideas and I think your example of, you know, talking to staff and putting to them, did they want to change in hours? You know, that voluntary and upfront conversation, it can actually have a really good outcome. And again, yeah, putting forward that level of transparency. Family daycare does need leaders at the moment. It needs people leading the team of stakeholders, leading the day-to-day operations, innovation and change, all of the review processes, vision and goals, structural changes, advocacy, and all the while you're keeping an eye on the philosophy and making sure you're still working with the values that you've set for family daycare and your service, and whether they're still matching or whether they need to change. So I suppose I'm putting out there that we recognise that that's a big task, yeah. And you are the leaders, that's how it is. And again, people are watching for you to tell them what you expect and what you want them to do. More information. Creating Our Future isn't available on the website at the moment. I don't know if it will be down the track, but we've definitely got hard copies for you to take today, and we would encourage you to take them and share them with your team. Family Daycare at the Crossroads is a report that was put together by the University of New South Wales, again in support of the project after they'd I suppose they'd looked at the information they'd previously collated and also went back to the sector representatives and had conversations with them. So there's a little bit of information there through that. And also the Journey to Excellence, the Wynnum report, as I said, is available on our website, and I definitely would encourage you to have a look at that if you get a chance, and if you're looking at reviewing your service and different ways to approach it, I suppose, and think about it. New South Wales, Western Australia and Queensland all have like small business corporation centres or whatever, and again, often there's information available on their websites that might support, whether it be, you know, review strategies that you take on board, or you know, different templates and things that you might use within your business. And again, remembering how you contact us through our email and our website. Again, if you're part of the emailing list, that alerts will come out to you about, you know, different things taking place, webinars and just changes. And we also have on that website the frequently asked questions, which we sometimes get answers to. So Ricky and I were talking earlier about the questions that are put to us that we definitely do pass on to the department, and we do hope we get replies to those questions so we can again feed the information back to the sector. So we will finish up there. Thank you very much for coming, and I do wish everybody the best and your services the best. And I think the fact that you've taken the time to come and again be part of the conversation and share, I think that's a fantastic thing for family daycare across the board.